This is a great topic, and here's why. Most people don't realize the power dynamic that exists in the typical employer-employee relationship, and that has led to a lot of issues that affect both parties. The simple fact is that your boss has more power than you do. So if you do not know how to use that knowledge to your advantage, you could get taken advantage of. Now, the employer does have more power, but the employee has access to certain tools. It's just that most people don't know about them. But today we're gonna be talking about the at-will employment doctrine and what it really means. So let's get started. Let's kick things off with a metaphor. The metaphor is that the employee is like a brown bag. Here's how it goes. Employees are brown bags. We are used until we are no longer useful, and then we get thrown away. Does anyone else feel this way? And if you think about it, it's actually pretty accurate, because here's the thing. When you buy a paper bag from the grocery store, you use it for a certain period of time to carry your groceries, and then what happens? You throw it out. You take it for granted, and eventually you replace it. And when it comes to your career, it's no different. When you are just a number in the corporate world, when you're just a cog in the machine, when you're just a unit of production to a large corporation, what happens is you become expendable. You become disposable, much like that brown bag. And here's the thing, most people accept it. Most people roll over and play dead, and they submit to this fate. But today, we're going to talk about how you can fight back against that narrative, at-will employment. Now, let us talk about this concept of at-will employment, because it is at the heart of this issue. The simple definition is that either the employer or the employee can end the employment relationship at any time for any reason. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions to this rule, like discrimination based on a protected class. But the point is that in the majority of states in the U.S., at-will employment is the default. And that means that your employer can technically fire you for almost any reason they want, and that gives them a lot of power. Like, imagine if you had the power to fire someone for no reason. What kind of an environment would you create? What kind of a culture would you cultivate? Well, the truth is that you would probably create a culture of fear. A culture where people are too afraid to speak up, too afraid to ask for help, and too afraid to demand what they deserve. And that's exactly what happens when you have at-will employment. Why is at-will employment a problem? Well, if you've been listening, the answer should be pretty obvious, but let me spell it out for you anyway. The problem with at-will employment is that it puts all of the power in the hands of the employer. If you're an employee, you're constantly worried about getting fired. You never really feel secure in your job, and that makes it difficult to do your best work. You're always walking on eggshells around your boss. You're always trying to make sure that you don't say the wrong thing or make a mistake. And the bottom line is that no one works at their full potential when they're in that kind of environment. At-will employment and productivity. Research shows that the threat of termination reduces productivity. When employees are constantly worried about getting fired, they're not able to focus on their work. They're always looking over their shoulder, always waiting for the axe to fall. And that kind of anxiety is not conducive to a productive work environment. Additionally, when employees are in a constant state of fear, they're less likely to take risks, less likely to come up with innovative ideas, and less likely to speak up and solve problems. Why? Because they're afraid of what their boss might think or how it might affect their job security. And that's not good for the employer, because they're essentially stifling creativity and innovation. At-will employment and employee retention. Another problem with at-will employment is that it makes it difficult for employers to retain good employees. When employees are constantly worried about getting fired, they're more likely to look for another job. And that means that the employer has to keep investing in training and development, which is expensive. And it also means that the employer is constantly having to deal with the disruption that comes from having employees leave. When employees leave, it takes time and money to find and train their replacements. And that kind of disruption is not good for the employer. At-will employment and employee engagement. At-will employment also leads to disengagement among employees. When employees don't feel like they have a safe and stable work environment, they're not going to be engaged in their work. They're not going to be invested in the success of the company. And that's a problem for the employer, because they want employees who are engaged and invested in their work. Disengaged employees are less productive, less creative, and more likely to leave. So how can this be fixed? Well, the first step is to raise awareness. Most people don't realize the power dynamic that exists in the employer-employee relationship. And until that changes, the system will continue to favor the employers. The second step is to educate yourself about your rights. In most states, you have more rights than you think. Just because your employer has the power to fire you doesn't mean that they can fire you for anything. There are certain rules and regulations that protect you, and it's important to know those rules. The third step is to band together with other employees. There is power in numbers. If all employees understand their rights and work together, they can create real change. The fourth step is to vote with your feet. If you're not happy with the way you're being treated, quit your job and find a better one. That may seem like a simple solution, but it really is the most effective way to bring about change. When employees start quitting their jobs, employers will have to listen and make changes. Conclusion. In conclusion, I want to say that the power dynamic that exists in the employer-employee relationship is not a level playing field. The employer has more power than the employee, and that can lead to a lot of problems. At-will employment puts all of the power in the hands of the employer, and that can lead to low productivity, high turnover, and disengaged employees. The good news is that there are things that can be done to fix this problem. Raise awareness, educate yourself about your rights, band together with other employees, and vote with your feet. Those are the steps that need to be taken to create a more balanced and equitable relationship between employers and employees. And now I want to turn it over to you. Do you agree or disagree with the brown bag analogy? Do you feel like you are just a number to your employer? Do you feel like you are expendable? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, I invite you to check out my other content. Thank you for watching and have a great day.